This section is focused on the use of the loft command. Loft is a command that you can use in Rhino to create shapes much like this, and I'm going to now go through how you create these kind of twisting tower-like forms with the loft command. The first thing that I would do is to go to the top-down view and draw a circle, and we're going to draw a circle, and then what we're going to do is go back to perspective, and we're going to copy it by typing copy and then dragging it vertically. So if we go to front view, we're about to drag it vertically, holding shift. Okay, and then all you have to do now is select both of these curves and type in tween curves, and then we're going to set the number to 5, which is fine, and hit enter. You're going to get a bunch of curves between, and then we're just going to go and we're going to resize each one, different kind of diameters, maybe move a couple outwards, do the same with this, and repeat, just move that over there. And then what we're going to do is just select all of these curves and type in the loft command and hit enter. Okay, and then what you can do here is you see the seam that's running along all of our curves, and we can hit enter again, and then we're going to get a preview of what our output would be like. So this is using straight sections. We can use normal, which is going to be a little more curvy. We can do loose, which actually looks quite nice in this case. It's a bit tighter. There's tight, which constrains the areas a bit harder. There's the straight sections, which we saw earlier. Developable, which doesn't work very well in this case. And uniform. I think I quite liked how the loose setting looked, so we're just going to select that. And we're going to go to do not simplify and hit OK. Then we have this form. That's our first tower is finished. We can do this with all different types of shapes, so we'll just do a couple more different variations. So we're going to take the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle like this. We're just going to use the array now. So we're going to type in array and hit enter. It's going to ask us how many in the x direction. We're just going to hit enter because we only want 1. Y direction, we want 1. And now the z direction, which is going vertically, which is what we want. And we're going to say 5. Then we click on our object and just drag up, and we can choose the spacing between our curves. I'm just going to do something like that and hit enter. You can then go along and maybe rotate some of these. And see, maybe you will resize a couple. Like so. Like that. And then if we select all of those and type in loft, hit enter, we're going to get this. We can then play around with the different settings again to find something quite nice. I think normal is fine, but maybe we can try a couple of options down here. So if we do not simplify, it's going to be quite hard in surface. But we can try the rebuild with a lower amount of curves, and it's going to create something that's a bit more organic like this. You can even play around with the number of control points to get something a little bit with more definition. I think this looks quite interesting, so we can hit finish on that. I'm just going to delete the curves that we have from there, and with something like this. We can even take this, and once it's here we can also rebuild by typing in rebuild. And we can change the amount of curves that it's built out of. So if we wanted to reduce it, we can. So we could maybe reduce this to 10 by 10, and we'd see the effect that that has on our shape. So it becomes a little bit more simplified. I think I'm going to leave it how it is and maybe cap the tops. Have this kind of solid vase-like object. Okay, and we'll just do one more, last one. So I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to create a circle, and I'm going to create a rectangle, and just go back to perspective. What we can do now is we can leave the rectangle on the bottom, raise the circle up, and we're going to use the tween command that we used earlier, except this time we have two different shapes, and all it's going to do is try to merge these objects in a way. So if I type tween curves, you're going to see that it slowly transitions from a rectangle to a circle, which is what we want. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm just going to go along and maybe have a look at these curves, make sure everything's okay. We could even play around by moving some of them left and right, like we did before. Maybe something like that, quite fun. And then just raise this up. And then what we can do is we can type in loft, enter. We have this like kind of wacky twisted tower going from the square all the way up to a circle. You can maybe not simplify it. See how it looks out of straight sections. We can try the normal mode and just try to find the sort of effect that we're looking for. So maybe that's okay. And yeah, the last thing that we can try to do is to turn the edit points on, and then we could go through and customize the shape of it manually using the control curves. So if we wanted to reduce this height, and we wanted to make this not stick out quite as far, we can easily do that by just moving some of these points around to refine our shape to something that we like a lot better. The next command that we're going to be looking at is the revolve command. So here are a couple of examples of what you can make by using the revolve function. Essentially, a revolve is a profile that you're rotating in a certain amount of degrees to extrude on a circular radius. So to do something like this, we're just going to hide these. We're going to go to an orthographic view, like the front view. And then we're just going to use the control point curve here to just draw something out. So I'm just going to go and just draw something. And then we're just going to select this. We're going to turn points on. And we're just going to adjust the shape, the overall form. I just want to make sure that this is aligned with the bottom one, like so. And I'm just going to adjust these. Just move them down. A couple of those. There we go. Great. So now that we have a profile, we can go back to our perspective view and have a look at our profile. If we type in revolve, if I could revolve, and then it's going to ask you to start the start of the revolve axis, which is where the center of your object is going to be once it's finished, which is right here. And this is where we're going to be rotating around. So it's going to ask for a starting angle, just hit enter, and then it's going to say how far you want to rotate to, and we're going to go full 360 degrees. and that's what it is by default. So if we hit enter, we're going to get a finished shape like this. This is really great for creating these kind of circular forms that are quite organic and maybe repeated around a central point. It's almost like an extrusion, but around a 360 degrees. You can do this with all different types of forms. It doesn't have to necessarily be organic. You could also do something that's quite hard-edged, like, for example, something quite pixelated in how it looks. I'm just going to make the bottom parts line up with one another. I'm just going to join those together. And then in the 3D view, we can go ahead, select this, type revolve, choose the central axes, hit enter, and enter again. And then we get something that's a little bit more hard-edged and geometric rather than organic, like our previous example. The final command that we're going to be using is the sweep command. And the sweep can be used to create forms such as the one on the screen right here. Something that is flowing along a particular path. You can think of it like extrude a long path from SketchUp. And I'm just going to show you how to make something like this now. Okay? So if we just hide that, we can go to top view quickly. And I just want to make a couple of walls that we're going to treat as barriers. So I'm just going to make a wall like this, and then go to perspective and give it a bit of height. That's great. And then what you can do is if you hold Alt while dragging along an arrow, you can duplicate something along that axis. So now we have two walls, and all we're going to do is just give them a nice bit of space between them. Go to front view, sorry. And we are going to use the control point curve to kind of draw out the path that we want our form to take. So I'm gonna click a few points here, and don't worry too much, because we're going to go in and clean this up in a moment with the control points. So for now we're going to have something like this. I'm just going to turn points on, and then I'm just going to go through and tidy this up a little bit to make it a bit neater. We're just going to make it match up with the walls there, so it looks like the building is coming over them. And then we just drag this point down a little, drag this point up in slightly, and down a little bit. And then just going to tidy this side up also. Okay, just trying to get a rough shape here, nothing too serious. So now we have this. What we're going to do is, from the perspective view, we're just going to click on it, and we're going to offset. So if we click on it and type offset, we can define the distance. So if we click on distance, we'll be able to draw a line for how far we want to offset. So this would be roughly the height of our building. So I'm going to do something, nothing too high, but maybe it's easier to do this from the front view, perhaps. Something like this would work. So now we offset our curve. Okay, great. And what we'll do now is just quickly go to perspective view. This is looking great. We're just going to draw a rectangle with 3 points. So if you click on this point and the end point, you should then be able to, from the top view, drag it out and create a rectangle like this. So now we have 1, 2 rails and 1 profile, and all we have to do is now click on our type in sweep 2 and hit enter. We can select our first rail, our second rail, and then our cross section. And when we hit enter, we're going to get something like this. You can play around and adjust the settings by rebuilding it with a certain amount of curves. If you want something that ends up kind of organic and flowing, you can definitely do that. One setting that I would recommend leaving on is maintain height, otherwise you end up something that kind of billows out. So we're going to put that back on. And I'm quite happy with how this looks, so I'm going to hit OK. And now we have the overall shape. I'm just going to play around with the dimensions a little bit. Like that. That's great. Okay. And then I'm just going to delete these curves because we don't need them any longer. And then we're just going to offset surface, sorry. If you type offset surf, you can then click on our poly surface and hit enter. All of the arrows should be pointing towards the inside. If they're facing out like this, just click anywhere on the form and it's going to flip them. And then just set the distance at something like, say 10. Just maybe a little thick, so we can redo that with, say 5. And that's great. So now if we go to our shaded view up here, you'll see that we have this nice kind of flowing form that's wrapping over these walls. And with a hollow center, so you can kind of go through it. And there we go.